When people encounter some really bad thing in life, the most natural thing to do, of course, is to say, why did this happen? Or why did this happen to me? Why did this happen now? The very natural why question that we ask in times of loss or tragedy reflects our desire to live in a world that makes sense. However, it is never really answerable and doesn't help us deal with the immediate situation. The question you need to ask is, what do I do now? When you're trying to support somebody else, we often do things that are equivalent to the why question, except we're giving answers, not asking questions, and they are not helpful. They may be true, but they're not helpful. This is observations about theology, comments like, it's okay, God is in control, or be thankful it wasn't worse, or don't ever let yourself get angry at God, or don't lose your faith about this. Good things always will happen in the end. You'll be a better person for this. It's all kinds of may be true, but totally unhelpful. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of these sorts of things, you know how hurtful they can actually be to somebody who's suffering. So we want to stay away from theology when we're doing support and stick with practical and emotional support. Just remember those two things. Practical support of helping people with the material things they need to get through a tough situation. Doing things for them, helping them out, transportation, cooking, financial, logistical help. Don't ask people if you can do anything, just do it.
The immediate needs are practical. So rather than platitudes, people need practical help. Do you need a lift? Shall I come with you if you have to go and see the coroner? Would you like me to come with you to the undertakers? Have you thought about whether you want flowers or not? Do you know who you'd like to take the service? And then whoever they want should come and talk it all through, make sure that people are able to make choices, guided to make their own choices and things. It's too late afterwards to think, oh, I wish I'd done this or said that or directed this differently. So they need practical help and support. But also, depending on the individual circumstances, if it is a brother who's lost his wife, as happened in our meeting, a young brother with a baby and a toddler lost his wife. He needed childcare. He needed people to do the washing. He needed people to do the shopping. He needed hands-on help. Or if it's an elderly brother, yes, he may not know how to turn the washing machine on, and he's just sitting in a chair because he doesn't know what to do and how he's going to cope. He may need someone to bring him a shepherd's pie or a cake or take him out for lunch. So yes, in the early days, it's the practical issues that matter. And another thing we're nervous of, and that is, in the case of bereavement, talking about the person who's died. You think, oh, I better not say anything, you might upset them. But that's just the thing that people want to do. They want to talk about the person who's died. So I think if you go to try to comfort someone, you need to be observant, you need to listen, you need to read what it is they want and need, and not go with your own agenda, thinking, oh, I know what I'll do to help. Jesus treated every individual differently that he met, and he started at the point they were at. He didn't walk up to people in great distress and dismiss their situation. He dealt with the situation from where they were at and with the feelings that they had at the time. And I think if you go to see someone who's bereaved, their feelings are down. And you won't connect with them if you come out with cheerful quotations like, oh, don't worry, they'll be in the kingdom, or all things work together for good. They're not able to take that on board at the time. And from my own experience and things that other people have said to me, they've got to start where they are. So they will read the Psalms that are about depression and sorrow and crying out to God for help. Or they'll begin with Job. A lot of people turn to Job because those readings are in touch with the feelings that they have at the time. And then gradually you're brought up and up and up until you can accept the more positive ones. You can't drag people out of where they're at. You start where they're at.
There's a whole list of wrong things that you could say that imply judgment and add, guilt or put a barrier between you and the other person. So I think you have to think to yourself, well, what would I want said to me? What would a compassionate and loving friend say to me? And what do I want to say to other people? And that might just be the gift of silence at times, when you're just there with them. And you can say, I really don't know what to say to you, but I'm here. I think we all need to be heard, and we all have a story inside. And for the person with the problem, they're the expert on their problem. They've lived with it all of their life, perhaps, and there's all kinds of parts that come to bear on that. They know probably what they have to do. Their own experience has taught them that this is the way that I need to move forward. They don't need somebody to tell them that. Nor do they need someone to say to them, there's a lack of faith here, or you need to pray more. So I think by listening, you can empower the person and lift the burden of emotion that they're dealing with. Because in that situation of dealing with whatever the problem might be, there's an overwhelming load of emotions that comes to bear on them. So their focus is of necessity narrowed, and it's like they're looking through a tunnel and the emotions are pressing in on each side, and their vision is compressed into this small space. But when you listen to my story and you listen to what's going on in my life and what's brought me to this place, and you hear the emotion that I'm feeling, and you might say to me, I hear a lot of fear in your voice, or I hear anger, and I feel heard, then it lifts that burden of emotion. And once the emotion is out of the way, then you can focus on what you need to do cognitively to move through and to take the next step.
Counselling isn't advising, counselling is listening and allowing people to talk themselves into solutions. That's the essence of counselling, really. And it's hard being a good listener. It's a skill to be learned, is listening. Because we're all too good at, and I used to be guilty in this respect of saying, oh, well, of course I know what you mean because I know what you're saying because I keep bringing yourself back into the picture, and you've got to put yourself out of the picture and focus on this person. And again, we learn that from Jesus. And say, how do you feel about that? Do you want to talk about? Would you like to go for a walk? Do you want me to come and pick you up on Sunday? The focus has got to be on that person, and to observe and listen, and find out what it is they really need to do, and the support they need.
What do I say? That would be like one of these questions. Well, that's the wrong question to ask, because you don't need to say anything. What do I say kind of implies that there are some magic words or something you can say that'll make things better. It's nothing you can say that will make things better. So don't worry about what do I say. It's what do I do and who am I? If I'm close to that person before their accident, I'm still close to them now. If I come to somebody and I don't know what to say, I know I can give them a hug. I know I can say, this must be very hard for you. I want you to know that I feel very sorry about this. I don't know what it's like for you, but it's very difficult for me knowing that. All you have to do is acknowledge that this is a very difficult situation. You don't have to say anything. You're not going to fix it with your words.
One thing that I'd found helpful was looking at God, how God sends rain on the just and the unjust, that he's non-discriminatory in his blessings. So if blessings are like that, why shouldn't suffering be the same way? Why, because I'm a believer, do I think that I shouldn't suffer? Suffering helps me to feel that I'm part of the rest of humanity. I'm participating in the sufferings. Christ suffered far more than I'll ever have to suffer, so why shouldn't I, in some measure, suffer as well? And looking at whether life is fair or not, and realizing that life is not fair, or not fair. It just is, and it just happens, and we have to know what to do to deal with it. And moving forward and taking that next step of what and how, rather than becoming overly focused on the why, is going to be helpful. Hopefully one day we'll understand the why, but in the meantime, let's just focus on the what and the how. What do I need to get through this day, and how can I implement it? Jesus addresses that question with the Tower of Siloam. When the disciples come to him and they say, well, the Tower of Siloam fell on these people, were they worse sinners? And Jesus says, no, they weren't. But unless you repent, you're all going to perish. So the lesson is that now tragedy and suffering happen. And really it's just accelerated mortality, because we're all going to die. So for some it's a shorter time, for some it's a longer time. But in the state that we're in right now, that's all part of it. So the best thing we can do, as we said before, is find out what we need to do next and how we need to do it.
One thing that severe adversity certainly can teach us is the issue of perspective or priority. When something we have that we think is very valuable is suddenly taken out of our lives, we begin to appreciate or focus, say, I may have lost this, but I'm still alive. Or I may have lost my job, but I still have my family. I still have God. And ultimately, this whole idea of perspective is that no adversity can, of necessity, disrupt our relationship to God. When we realize that nothing can happen that changes the fact that God has called me, has chosen me, and I am part of God's family, that is a relationship that cannot in any way be disrupted by adversity, that can help us focus. Everything else might be gone. Maybe this is where God was trying to get with Job. If I strip everything away, but can I help Job understand that my relationship to you cannot be taken away except if you decide to abandon it? People can lose a lot, but with every loss we have, it should help us reprioritize or refocus our lives, say, but what is truly important? My relationship to God, my relationship to my family, love, faith, things that cannot ever be taken away.